The stem of the wine glass was still damp in my fingers when I heard the sound behind me, just a faint exhale through his nose, like someone trying not to speak. I turned halfway, expecting a joke or at least a question, but he was just standing there, leaning against the counter, his eyes steady on me like he was measuring something. I should have stopped there, I should have read the room, but I was still laughing, the last message from Brian open on my screen, some ridiculous meme he'd sent calling me his soulmate/co-pilot in corporate crime. It was stupid, playful, not real, so I rolled my eyes, rinsed the glass, and said it without thinking. When he calls me a soulmate, he's just kidding around. Nothing. No raised voice, no sarcastic retort, just the sound of a drawer opening behind me, a zipper. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him pulling his duffel from the closet, methodical, calm. Wait, what are you? He didn't answer. Moved past me like I wasn't even in the room, picked up the charger from the nightstand. 2 pairs of shoes from the hallway. The coat he always wore on cold morning runs, folded once, laid across the top. He paused at the table, took out his keys, and set them down with a quiet finality. Then the door closed behind him. If you're still listening, and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. I stood in the kitchen for a full minute before I moved. The wine glass was still in the sink, half rinsed. I turned off the tap and just stared at the countertop, heart thudding louder than it should have been. It was so quiet in the apartment, I could hear the refrigerator hum and the faint click of the hallway light he must have switched off as he left. At first, I didn't panic. I mean, we'd had tense moments before. He was quiet by nature, always needed space to process. I figured he was just cooling off, going for a drive, maybe staying at his brother's place. But hours passed. Then a full night, no text, no missed call, no apology waiting in the inbox, nothing. By morning, his side of the closet was half empty. His drawer in the bathroom was clean, no toothbrush, no razor, not even the little bottle of aftershave he always used after meetings. That afternoon, I called twice. No answer. The second time, it went straight to voicemail. I started telling myself it was about the timing, that he must have had a bad day, that maybe he'd been waiting for some reason to walk, and I'd handed it to him gift-wrapped. But even then, I didn't believe it, not fully, not until I opened our shared cloud calendar and saw the new entry. Storage move, 2 p.m. Tuesday. That wasn't a reaction, that was a plan. I stared at the words for a long time, my finger hovering over the edit button, as if deleting it would undo the fact that he'd already scheduled the erasure of our life together. By the second day, I checked our joint account. It was still there, but half of it had been moved, legally, fairly, but decisively. By the third day, his location was offline, and I realized he hadn't just left the apartment. He had left me. The joke wasn't funny anymore, not even to me, but I couldn't call Brian. I didn't even want to, because this wasn't his fault, not really. He didn't know what I'd said, didn't know that the joke, harmless in the moment, had landed like a bomb in the middle of a man who'd been quietly holding on. The texts between me and Brian hadn't been scandalous, but I started rereading them with new eyes, the long-running nicknames, the late-night messages that had once felt casual. I started wondering what they'd looked like to someone sitting on the other side of the room, someone who wasn't laughing. I scrolled up through months of conversation, harmless jokes, flirty undertones, too many winks, too many "you get me" messages I didn't think twice about, until now. The wine glass was still on the counter. I hadn't moved it, neither had he, and that's when it hit me. He didn't plan to come back. He hadn't stormed out. He hadn't burned anything down. He just left, like a man who'd waited long enough for something to change, and when it didn't, he stopped waiting. Not with a bang, with a blank. I checked the calendar again, then I checked it the next day, and the day after that. But there were no new entries, no clues, no reach, only silence. It started with little things. His favorite coffee mug was gone, the worn leather belt he always looped on the third notch, the old canvas duffel that still smelled like the sea from our trip to Big Sur, missing. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he'd taken a few things to clear his head, make a point. But on the second morning, I noticed the stack of books on the nightstand was gone too, the ones I used to tease him about for never finishing, and the picture frame from the hallway shelf, the one with us on that boat, sunburned and smiling like we had forever mapped out, gone without a trace. Then came the silence, the kind that doesn't feel like a pause but an ending, like someone muted the soundtrack of your life without telling you the scene had already changed. I tried calling once, just once. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I hung up before the tone. Then I waited, told myself maybe he was hiking or just screening calls. The next day, I tried again. Straight to voicemail this time. A neighbor knocked that afternoon, said there was a van parked outside earlier, plain white, no logo. Two guys moved quietly, professionally. They loaded boxes into the back without a word. The building manager let them in with a key. I asked what time. About 2:15, he said, and it didn't take them long, maybe 20 minutes. I thanked him, closed the door, and leaned against it as something deep inside me shifted. Not panic, not grief, just cold certainty. He hadn't just left. He'd planned this. I opened the closet fully for the first time since he walked out. Half the hangers were gone, the good coat, the shoes he always polished, his toolbox, even the extra set of sheets we kept for guests. The careful absence of each thing told its own story. He wasn't clearing space, he was erasing presence. I checked the bank next. Our joint account still had money, but the secondary account, the one I never used, showed a transfer. Not all of it, just his half, to an institution I didn't recognize, some small regional bank we'd never talked about. Then the real blow hit. His name was removed from the lease. That was when my fingers went numb, because that wasn't impulsive. That was paperwork. That was calls and signatures and quiet execution. That meant he'd thought this through days ago, maybe weeks. I checked the mail the next morning like muscle memory. Nothing from him, just a utility notice, already updated to reflect a single occupant. No note, no explanation, no last word, just absence. The refrigerator had less food in it than I remembered. Even the spices were thinned out. His hot sauce, the chili rub he used for weekend ribs, gone. I stood in the middle of the apartment with my arms crossed, trying to calculate what was left. Not just in the room, in the whole story. There was no fight, no slammed door, no shouting match I could replay and weaponize in my head. Just that moment at the sink, that stupid comment, that silence, and then movement. Clean, quiet, final movement. I scrolled through old texts, but there was nothing new. No breadcrumb trail, no reply to my messages. Not even a read receipt. It was like texting into deep water, the kind that doesn't echo, just swallows. My thumb hovered over his name in my favorites list. Then I stopped, because I finally understood the difference between space and distance. I thought he'd walked away to cool off. He'd disappeared to start over. And for the first time, I saw the apartment clearly. Every empty drawer, every echoing footstep, every place where something used to sit, now vacant, quiet, stripped of meaning. I sat on the edge of the bed that still had my side wrinkled and his side smoothed over from disuse. It wasn't that he ghosted me. It was that he removed himself, like a man who'd been ghosted long before I noticed, one who stopped expecting anything from the person who claimed to love him, and finally acted on the truth. Not out of anger, not even out of revenge, just peace, unreachable, irreversible peace. It was raining that morning, soft and steady, the kind that blurred everything just enough to feel cinematic. I wore mascara for the first time in weeks, not for him, for clarity, for the idea that something might be repaired if I just showed up composed, rational, maybe even a little graceful. I had this image in my head, one I didn't say out loud, him coming back, asking questions, needing answers, letting me explain. Instead, I walked into a ghost. Brian met me downstairs. He was early, which wasn't like him. Said something like, "You sure this isn't going to be weird?" I laughed too quickly and waved him toward the elevator. "It's fine. I just want you to see it from my side." I said it like I had a side that made sense. The building manager gave us a look as we passed the front desk, one of those slow, narrowed eye expressions like he was waiting for a punchline. I nodded politely. Didn't ask. We stepped out onto the 4th floor. My heels clicked down the hallway with too much confidence. My key still worked. That felt symbolic, like a door still cracked open, waiting for something. I pushed it open, still talking. It's not what he thinks. The stuff Brian and I texted about. I mean, I'm not saying it was perfect, but then I stopped. The air inside was cold and unmoved. Brian was still behind me, holding a bottle of wine like we were arriving for dinner. But the place wasn't dim or romantic or lived in. It was vacant. I blinked. No couch, no lamp. The rug was gone, and the table we picked together at the downtown flea market, gone. The bookshelf, the coffee machine, even the little cactus I forgot to water, all gone. "Is this the right apartment?" Brian asked, voice half a whisper. I stepped forward like I'd been pushed. The kitchen was stripped bare. The drawers were open, all of them, empty. The sink was dry, not even a sponge. Every plate, every fork, every sign of warmth or history, gone. But it wasn't until I saw the counter that my lungs forgot how to fill. A single piece of folded paper, centered, weighted with a small silver key. His, I realized. I reached for it slowly, like it might vanish if I moved too fast. The paper was thick, the kind he liked, matte, not glossy, one line. The joke's over. So is the marriage. No signature, no date, just that. Clean. Final. Brian stood awkwardly by the doorway, shifting from one foot to the other. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Because for the first time since all this started, I wasn't embarrassed. I was gutted. He hadn't blocked me. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't done anything dramatic or petty or cruel. He had just removed himself. Thoroughly, deliberately, silently. I walked into the bedroom half hoping something would remain. A sock, a note, a dent in the pillow. Nothing. Even the mirror we hung ourselves, the one I insisted be centered perfectly over the dresser, was gone. The screws still sat on the wood like tiny accusations. "You okay?" Brian finally asked. I didn't answer. Because what was I supposed to say? That I thought I could control the story? That I expected to walk in and charm my way through the mess? That I thought my words could fill a space already emptied of me? I leaned against the door frame and stared at the closet. His side was bare, hangers gone. My side looked suddenly excessive, like someone had dressed up a mannequin for a part she never earned. There was no yelling, no confrontation, just the echo of my own assumption. That I could explain, that he'd wait to hear it, that my choices were still part of a shared equation. I realized then he didn't want closure, he wanted distance, and he'd achieved it in the most unarguable way possible, by making sure there was nothing left to hold on to, not even the echo of a door closing, just a flat, still note and an apartment that no longer knew my name. The first story hit 2 days after she saw the apartment emptied out. A friend of mine sent me a screenshot in one of those carefully angled brunch selfies, cinnamon pancakes, bright lighting, hair curled just enough to look effortless. The caption read, "Choosing peace, choosing joy, letting go of what doesn't grow with you." I remember squinting at it from the deck of the boat, grease on my hands, sun low behind me. The irony wasn't even sharp. It was predictable, a performance broadcast for validation. Her friends flooded the comments. "You deserve happiness. So proud of your strength. Thriving." I didn't respond, not even to the friend who sent it. Just wiped my hands on a rag and kept sanding the edge of the companionway hatch. There was still too much rot beneath the surface, not on the boat, in the way I'd been living before. That first post was followed by others. Rooftop drinks, casual yoga shots, sunset photos with vague captions like, "Healing is messy but worth it." I noticed a pattern. Every photo had light. Every caption had subtext. Every tag was conspicuously absent of my name. Then came the version of the story she actually spoke aloud. She overreacted. She was jealous. She always struggled with trust issues. She needed therapy anyway. That last one made me laugh quietly when it reached me, not out of pain, out of recognition. Because projection has a tone, and hers was practically symphonic. It wasn't just friends she told. It was mutual acquaintances, former coworkers, even my sister, who politely redirected the call but mentioned the tone afterward. "She sounds performative," she said carefully. I just nodded. I knew what she meant. Back on the coast, life was simpler, slower. I rented a small place above a bait shop, paid in cash, no smart locks, no shared accounts, no "where are you" texts. The boat I bought was older than both of us, 32 feet of fiberglass dreams and neglected teak. Her name was barely legible. Delilah. I never renamed her. I just started over. Most mornings started the same way. Coffee black, pan-fried eggs, and silence. Not heavy silence, the kind that holds space. I didn't post about it, didn't document the rebuild, didn't caption my breakfast or film time lapses of sanding or varnishing. I just lived. I didn't have to argue with the version of me she was feeding the world because the people who mattered already knew better, and the rest weren't mine to correct. One day, I overheard someone at the dock say, "I think he used to live in the city." That was it. No name, no backstory, just a quiet man in a sun-faded hat, scraping layers of old paint off a keel like it might free something older than memory. That became my reputation, and I let it because when someone's loud enough, they expect a response, a rebuttal, a fight, but silence is surgical. It makes noise echo back on itself. I got a message from an old friend of hers around that time, simple, curious. Just wanted to ask, is it true what she said? I didn't answer. Because truth doesn't beg for stage time, and I was tired of being part of someone else's monologue. So I watched the tide come in, took photos I never posted, ate dinner with my phone face down, and no desire to flip it. She kept narrating her version, hoping I'd rise to contradict it. I didn't. I just disappeared in plain sight and let her talk to a shadow that no longer cared to speak. The first message came mid-January. No subject line, just a simple, hollow line. Hope you're okay. I stared at it for a while, sitting in the corner of the marina workshop, my hands still dusty from sanding the new rudder mount. The wind was sharp that day, snapping through the sailcloth piled on the dock, like it had something to prove. I didn't respond. 3 weeks later, "I know you're probably still upset. We should talk." Still no subject line. Just that vague, floating phrase that people throw out when they want credit for trying without actually admitting anything. I archived the message and went back to sealing the cabin window frame. There was a crack along the edge I hadn't noticed before, one that would let in water if I didn't fix it now. That's how it was with her, too. A hairline fracture I ignored until it became structural. February came, then March. Another email. This time, I saw the photos of the coast. "Are you there now?" I never posted any photos, but someone else must have, a mutual friend maybe, someone visiting the same marina or cafe. That told me she was watching, scanning for traces, still convinced I was leaving footprints behind. Then came the text, just 4 words. "Please, just say something." I looked at my phone for a full minute, not out of indecision, out of disbelief, not because she missed me, but because the silence had shifted the balance, and she finally felt the weight of it. That's the part she never understood. I didn't disappear out of spite. I disappeared because every time I had tried to talk before, I was met with noise, jokes, shrugs, shrill distractions disguised as conversation. So now I gave her what she claimed to want, space. She called my sister after that, asked if I was okay, asked where I was, asked if I was seeing anyone. My sister, gracious as always, told her, "He's good, he's focused," and nothing more. 2 days later, I got a screenshot of a vague Instagram story, a black background, white font, some quote about timing and forgiveness, something hollow like, "If they don't come back, they were never yours." Underneath it, location unknown. The irony made me smile, because she still thought I'd orbit, that I was the kind of man who spun around her gravity even after the collapse. She didn't realize I'd found a new center, one that didn't require her permission to exist. I didn't block her. That would have implied conflict. I simply let every message float unanswered in the digital void. No bounces, no replies, no drama, just stillness. I watched the old marina dog chase seagulls along the dock that evening, tail high, barking at things too fast to catch. And I thought about how some people chase not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of losing control, of being left unread, of realizing their voice doesn't command the room anymore. That's what she was chasing now. Not me, the version of me who used to wait by the door, check the phone, ask if she was okay when she came home late, arms crossed, but words soft. That version was gone. No funeral, no obituary, just gone. And in his place was a man who no longer needed the last word because he'd already taken the last step, without announcement, without spectacle, just a quiet walk through a door that no longer opened both ways. She wore her old charm like a borrowed coat, still familiar in shape, but no longer fitting quite right. That's what my mother said later, after they closed the door. She smiled like she thought she was still welcome. She said quietly, drying the same dish twice, like she thought if she just played it soft enough, we'd all forget. It was mid-April, unseasonably warm. My father had been pruning the hedges when her car pulled up. She stepped out like it was nothing, like she hadn't vanished from our family photos, our dinners, our Christmas calls. "I just want to explain what really happened," she said. My father looked at her with the steady patience that had terrified me as a boy, that quiet stillness that only came from men who'd been through wars of many kinds and knew exactly when not to speak. He nodded once, not kindly, not cruelly, just firmly. "He doesn't live here." She blinked, not in shock, in recalculation, like she'd been expecting resistance or warmth, something she could work with. But this neutral refusal, it gave her no rhythm to dance around. I thought maybe," she started, but he was already turning back to the hedge. My mother watched from the window. She told me later that the engine idled for a full minute before the car pulled away. That night, the email came. Subject line, "Please, just closure." Inside, "I know I made mistakes. I just want to talk. I need to explain what I meant, what really happened. Are you okay? Please say something. I need to know you're okay." Need. That word again. Not want, not regret, not apology, need. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to the account I set up months ago, the digital holding pen for anything I no longer wanted to carry but couldn't bring myself to destroy, an address I never check, no alerts, no inbox badge, just a place for old weight to settle and sink. I remember staring at her name before I hit send, not for sentiment, for precision, for the understanding that this was the last line she'd cast before the water went completely still. She wanted a stage, a retelling, a way to recast herself not as the one who watched me walk out, but as the one who let me go out of mercy or confusion or grace. But she didn't get that. She got a hedge, a closed door, and an inbox that doesn't reply, because closure is something people ask for when they realize they're no longer the ending, just the middle. And I'd stopped rereading that chapter a long time ago. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with a soft grain to it, not standard. Deliberate. It showed up on a Tuesday, buried between a property tax notice and an offer for discounted marina insurance. No return address, just my name and handwriting I hadn't seen in a year. She'd always used that blue ink, always rounded the corners of her letters like a school teacher. For a second, I ran my thumb across the name, as if some part of me expected the letters to shift. They didn't. I didn't open it, not right away, not out of fear, just disinterest. I left it on the kitchen counter for 2 days, pushed to the side when I made coffee, stacked under a paperback when I needed space to cook. I knew what it was, a final performance, a monologue with no audience. That week, someone from back home sent me a link, one of those social posts that tries to sound profound but can't quite bury the ache underneath. Her face was angled in soft light, hair longer, captioned, "Healing doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes when you stop needing them." It was followed by a string of vague comments, hugs, encouragement. Then someone asked outright, "What happened with you and Brian?" Her reply, "He was too emotionally unavailable. I needed more." That made me laugh, not bitterly, just from somewhere low in the chest, where irony settles. Because a year ago, she'd stood in a sunlit apartment trying to convince me, and maybe herself, that her soulmate jokes meant nothing, that Brian was just a friend who got her, and now, after everything, she was rewriting the script again. New city, new tone, new costume. But I knew the truth. She didn't leave Brian because he was unavailable. She left because even in her little fantasy world, she needed an audience. And when the clapping stopped, she had no idea how to sit with silence. I finally picked up the envelope on Friday, turned it over once, twice, no seal, just a flap tucked neatly into itself like a whisper. I considered opening it, then didn't. Instead, I slipped it into the drawer with the spare batteries and the fishing licenses, not hidden, not displayed, just there. It's strange. The first time she left me speechless, it hollowed me out. This time, there was nothing left to drain. She had moved cities, changed numbers, started over in the way people do when they think geography can cleanse memory. And maybe it works for some, but not for her. Not when the last version of herself was still unanswered, unforgiven, not condemned, just ignored. She wanted a reaction, any reaction, a returned letter, a quiet call, a single line that said, "Yes, I remember that day." But she didn't get it because the truth no one tells you is that ghosting doesn't always hurt both ways. Sometimes it's just efficient. It draws a clean edge around a story that doesn't need revisiting. She mailed me our past. I kept sanding down my future. The photo inside, I assume it was one of us, probably smiling. Probably from that coastal weekend with the seafood place and the rain that never stopped. I'd know the edges of that memory even with my eyes closed, but I didn't need to see it because I already knew what she wanted from that envelope. She wanted to be remembered, not forgiven, not restored, just witnessed. But I wasn't the witness anymore. I was the silence that stayed. The church was quiet in the way only old wood and grief can make it, not heavy, just hushed, the kind of silence that stretches between pews, filling the space where people might otherwise try to comfort each other with words. I hadn't been in a building like that in years, but I came out of respect. Joel had been a good man, a better friend, a voice of reason when I didn't have one. She was 3 rows up, sitting beside a woman I barely recognized. Black dress, hair longer, posture perfect. There was a time I would have read the nervous tapping of her heel as a sign. Now I barely noticed. I felt her see me before I looked up. That slow awareness across a room, like something warm brushing the back of your neck. After the service, people stood around outside in polite clusters, the way they do when no one wants to go home just yet. I stayed near the tree line, nursing a paper cup of weak coffee, watching sunlight filter through the moss like someone had planned the lighting. And then she walked over. I could hear her steps before I saw her face. "Hey," she said softly, like the word might break if she spoke too loud. "You look good." I nodded once, neutral, not cold, just enough. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The wind tugged lightly at her sleeve. I could smell the same perfume she used to wear, or maybe one trying to imitate it. Subtle, floral, familiar in the way old ghosts are. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," she added. "I did," I said. She nodded. Let the silence stretch. Then, "Do you ever think about us?" It didn't come out dramatic. No pleading in her tone. Just a small question quietly launched into the space between us like a paper boat. I shrugged. Not really. That was it. No speech, no rehash, no slow motion montage of what we used to be. Just the truth. She blinked. Oh. It landed like a pebble dropped in a dry well. Expected, but still echoing deeper than she'd prepared for. I didn't soften it. Didn't offer a follow-up. I let the space fill itself. Because what she didn't know, or didn't want to believe, is that the version of me who might have entertained that question was gone. Not just buried, but composted. Something new had grown in his place. Stronger, quieter, uninterested in building bridges back to burned-out places. A car pulled up to the curb. Someone called her name. She gave me a small, brittle smile. "Take care, okay?" I nodded again, that same even gesture. The wind picked up slightly, enough to make her hair shift across her cheek like a curtain. She walked back toward the group, not quickly, not dramatically, just slower than when she'd come. I watched the trees sway above the cemetery wall and took one last sip of the bad coffee. The heat was gone. So was she. The message came at 12:42 a.m. I saw the screen light up while I was stacking coiled lines in the galley, prepping for a short trip down the coast. I hadn't turned off notifications, not because I was waiting, but because I didn't need to anymore. Nothing she could send would shift anything. Still, I glanced. Old reflex, her name, no subject line, no attachments, and just text, raw and unbuffered. I know I broke something. I was stupid. I was arrogant. "You didn't deserve that." It sat there, glowing softly in the dark. I didn't feel the kick in the gut I used to get when her name showed up unexpectedly. Didn't feel the old phantom sting of apology tangled with manipulation. There was no weight to it now. Just words. Honest, maybe, but too late and no longer relevant. I sat down on the edge of the narrow berth and read it again, once more. Not out of sentiment, out of respect, maybe, for the woman she used to be, or for the man I was when I loved her. Then I deleted it. No dramatic sigh, no screenshot, no storage folder for just in case, just a simple swipe, a tap, and gone. Not in anger, not in revenge, just like deleting an old file from a hard drive, something that once held meaning, but whose function had long since expired. She had finally said the thing I used to hope she'd say, back when I still needed to hear it, when the wound was fresh and the silence between us still sounded like punishment. But that version of me? He was long gone. He'd learned how to sleep without checking his phone. He'd learned how to anchor alone, how to read the weather in the sky instead of someone else's mood. He'd built a new life in a quieter place, not to hide, but to exist. And in that life, her apology wasn't a bridge. It was a postcard from a country I no longer visited, a reminder of a language I didn't need to relearn. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, a soft pressure against the hull, gentle and steady. I stood, stowed the rope, and dimmed the cabin lights. There was nothing left to untangle, nothing more to explain. Her reckoning had arrived, but mine had already passed, silent, complete, and unshakably done. 3 years to the day. She hadn't planned to drive by, that's what she'd tell herself later, but the route she chose, through old neighborhoods down that specific stretch of Maple Avenue, said otherwise. The light hit the building just right when she slowed, catching the rust-colored trim that used to annoy her in the mornings. Different car, in the space now. Compact, silver, with a child's sunshade in the back window. The curtains were new, too, bright blue, cheerful in a way we never were by the end. Through the second-floor window, she caught a glimpse of someone moving, a man laughing, holding up a mug like a toast. A woman leaned into him, barefoot, smiling like she didn't need to ask where he'd been the night before. No trace of us, no ghost, no shadow, just a place that had healed over and kept going. She sat there idling, her fingers still on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. There wasn't anything she could say. No one to hear it, even if she did. Just an empty parking spot that used to mean something and now belonged to someone else. She still checks sometimes. Mutual friends' feeds, old email drafts, the map history on her phone. Not for me, not exactly. For the echo, for the chance to stumble on a sliver of the man who used to meet her at the door, coffee in hand, a note folded in the sugar jar just to say he'd noticed something about her that morning. But echoes don't return texts. 30 miles down the coast, the sun was high and the water was calm. I stood barefoot on the dock, clipboard in hand, watching 2 of the local kids practice turning into the wind. They were getting the hang of it, learning when to hold tight and when to let go. It had taken me longer. The marina was quiet this time of year. Tourist season hadn't started yet, and the regulars were mostly out fishing or repairing small engines. I liked the rhythm of it, the honesty. A line snaps or it doesn't. A sail holds or it tears. You adjust, you patch, you move forward. A new instructor joined us recently. Nice guy, ex-Coast Guard, with that same look in his eye I used to see in the mirror, like someone who'd learned what mattered the hard way. He asked me once over beers after class if I ever thought about the woman who left. I didn't answer right away. Just watched the tide roll in beneath the dock, felt the sun on my arms, the salt crusting on my skin from the morning's wind. Then I smiled. I didn't lose her, I said. She lost the version of me she'll never meet again. He nodded like he understood, because that's the thing no one tells you. You don't get the old version of someone back just because you finally missed them. You get silence. You get absence. You get a life that moved on, not to hurt you, but because it had to. And some mornings when I walk the docks before sunrise and see the still water reflect the sky, I remember the weight I used to carry. Then I look around and realize it's not gone because I dropped it. It's gone because I rebuilt myself without it.